Hello everyone, Voodoo here, and today we're going to do some tier lists. So we're going to have two tier list videos this week for DPS. I'm not going to do tank and healer for 10.1.5. I will still be doing them for the big 10.2, 10.3, the big solid content release patches. But I think for each of these smaller patches, I'm just going to do DPS. A lot of things have changed since I did my last one. We've had a few reworks to a few different classes. We've had a brand new spec be introduced. So we're going to go through and we're going to talk about all the different DPS specs and where I think they rank in the current meta. Give a little bit of an explanation on each one as well. Before we get into that, make sure you hit the subscribe button and drop a like on the video. Both those things really help me out. I'm trying to push up towards 10K by the end of the year in terms of subscribers. And in terms of likes, the likes help spread the videos, which help grow the channel. The videos have been doing great recently with lots of likes, so keep up on that. Don't slack. It's the best, most free way to support any content creator. So let's talk a bit about how I'm going to use the rankings. So S tier is basically going to be the absolute insane meta comp. This is going to be the comp you see people running on the highest possible keys. These are like the absolute best specs for keys right now. Oftentimes there's maybe only one or two S tier specs. Sometimes there's three. But these are going to be like the best of the best. A tier are very solid, very strong ones. These are specs that you can absolutely push your title with, and you will see lots of them in title range. B tier are strong specs that might be a little bit one note. They're really, really good at the thing they do, but they do have a glaring weakness or a few glaring weaknesses that hold them back. C tier are the specs that are very strong in a very, very specific scenario, but overall have too many weaknesses to do better in this in the meta. They can be strong in the right players, and if you're good at them, keep playing them. But overall, I don't think they're anything too special. And D tier are the bad specs. No spec is really too bad, but these specs overall will do lower damage and just have relative difficulty in doing what you need them to do in a key. So with that out of the way, we have a lot of specs to get through. There's a lot of DPS specs now, and we even added one more. So let's get into it. So, start with Affliction Warlock. I'm going to put them up in B tier. Now, I think the recent rework to Doom Blossom and some of the seed stuff is actually pretty good in terms of Affliction Warlock. I think they're a little bit underrepresented and underappreciated. I could definitely see this moving up a lot. I do think it's a little untested, and we'll have to see where this ends up. So I'm going to hedge my bet here and put them in B tier. But I do think that Affliction Warlock's kit, in terms of how it bursts, what it has, can work very well with one of the other S tier specs, which I'll get to, and end up doing very well. I think they have a little bit of a weakness in single target as well. Their damage is dot based, which is never what you want. But they also scale very well into massive AoE pull sizes, which is definitely something very good, as Blizzard has been recently cracking down a bit on all those uncapped specs. Next up, Arcane. I put Arcane in B tier as well. Arcane got a rework to their class a bit. They were the least reworked of the mages. Where Orb Barrage is the thing now. And this gives them a lot of AoE burst damage with their orbs and stuff. But I think they're just a bit too one note. That's kind of all they can do. And that's strong, but when you compare it to some of the other mage specs, I think they're just worse than those mage specs. Generally speaking, you know, you're just going to play the best of the specs. I do think Arcane can do very solid bursts, but outside of that, they're just not going to do that much. So you're better off, honestly, playing one of the other two mage specs. But they are strong. They bring all the mage stuff, invis if you need, barriers, stuff like that. And it's just, they can do solid bursts on bosses and stuff. But overall, I do think B tier is fair. Going with another B tier spec, Arms Warrior. Arms is interesting in the fact that Arms and Fury just have very similar profiles in terms of what they do. Arms has a little bit more larger burst with Blade Storm and stuff like that. Fury is a little more consistent in 5 targets. So when you rank them, they're normally ranked very close to each other. That being said, Arms has very strong damage to low target counts, but when you go higher, it doesn't get very good. And I think overall it's just a little bit worse than Fury is, which is definitely pushing it down into B tier. If you're a good Arms Warrior player, you definitely can end up being strong and in a good spot overall. But that, coupled with how just generally unfriendly these dungeons are to melee, I think has them down in B tier. For a melee to do well, you really have to be just bringing absolutely insane stuff, and I don't think that Arms brings that. We're going to put Assassination Rogue in D tier. I just don't see it. They're a dot-based spec that doesn't really do much. Their main AoE gimmick is spreading a bunch of bleeds around with like a 45-second indiscriminate carnage or something like that. And this is strong because it can do silence and everything. But if you're bringing rogues, I don't know why you'd bring Assassination unless it's just a comfort pick. I would say it's one of the worst of the specs in general. And just being melee and being dot-based in this tier especially with how much burst damage is going around and how well the next spec actually plays into the meta. I think it's just a bad spot to be for Assassination Rogue. If you want to play Rogue, there is a better option, which we'll cover later. But I don't think Assassination's it. I think they're going to go down in D tier. Augmentation Evoker. Now, this is the wrong image. Augmentation's image. I'll throw it up on screen. It's a little, like, gem shard thing. But, you know, hey, tier list, whatever. Augmentation, incredibly powerful. Easily S tier. I did a video about the meta, like, I think it was Monday or Sunday or something. And just the difference from 2 weeks ago, a week ago in Keystone levels to when AUG was released is crazy. AUG is basically a free +2 to any Keystone levels you're doing. They're incredibly tanky. They bring so much damage all the time because of their buffs being on such short cooldowns, bringing so much. They bring survivability to your party with an HP increase that you can, on like a 1.5 minute, just use as a rally. They bring just passive move speed at times. They bring passive HP increase at times. They bring the ability to off-heal sometimes. They bring just like a threat debuff that makes like a bursty target do less threat. They bring like a shield to save people's lives. Augmentation Evoker is busted just beyond belief. They're so strong, and I think an S tier is very warranted for their inclusion. Beast Mastery, put them in C. Hunters in general in this meta I don't think are very strong. Beast Mastery has some solid AoE cleave. Very consistent, very low burst, but I just don't see Hunters doing that well. They are squishy, they bring turtle, that's about it. They don't really bring a ton of utility for your raid comp, for your dungeon comp. And overall, I just don't think they're that crazy. I think they're definitely fine, but they have a lot of weaknesses compared to a lot of the other specs right now that just leave them in a bit more of an undesirable spot. We're going to put Demonology up there in C tier as well. Demonology is good, but I don't think their AoE damage is anything crazy. It's mostly based around their demon. They definitely received some nerfs to that coming into this tier, and I think there are a better Warlock spec to play. Overall, I just don't think it's anything too crazy. They bring good burst with Tyrant, but it has been reduced a bit in AoE. I think they're very strong still in Raid with AUG especially. But overall, I think if you're going to play a Warlock in Mythic Plus, you should play Destruction. I think Destruction's really good. Again, I'm going to put it down in B tier because I just don't see Warlock overall being too crazy. Their damage isn't anything insane. They can perform well in longer, drawn-out pulls, but with the specs I think are the strongest right now, those pulls are just generally lower. They have strong burst damage with Infernal. Infernal is normally a 3-minute. I know it's possible to go down to get 2-minute Infernal now. I don't know if that's going to end up being meta. But overall, Warlocks in general in this season just aren't anything insane. They have some strengths, but they do also have weaknesses with mobility and just general damage outside of those CDs. So I will put them down in B tier. I could see this one moving up. This is definitely one of those ones where maybe it could be A tier, but I think B is safe for now. Devastation Evoker, on the other hand, is going to be an A tier. Now, the thing with this is that it's very, very strong. It did receive a bit of a nerf coming into this, reducing how much mastery they get, but giving them a buff overall. And this was a nerf to their output, but they are doing very strong damage-wise in terms of burst around their 2-minute window, with especially with the Legendary, which should be more available now that there is Bad Luck Protection. That wasn't around before, which means that a lot less people had it. But now, as the weeks go on, you should see more and more of them getting their Legendary, meaning more and more of them will do damage. They're very good targets to hit with AUG Evoker. On top of that, AUG Evoker also brings the threat reduction, which is strong. I think they are held back a bit by being cannibalized a bit with Augmentation Evoker. Augmentation Evoker is just very strong, brings like more utility than Devastation Evoker does, and just brings a lot more damage because of their buffs. But Augmentation Evoker is a very strong damage dealer that has a very good profile in terms of just damaging targets, as well as disintegration on single target, that I think it would be wrong to overlook them. Next up, we're going to move on down to Elemental Shaman. Now, I think Elemental Shaman is very strong. They really frequent burst. Stormkeeper is still a very powerful button. Earthquake's really strong, even when knocking down mobs. And they have strong bursts around their Storm Ellie. However, I think they're just a little bit underrepresented in this tier. They're very strong burst damage-wise. They have a lot of survivability as well. And they bring some really interesting knockups, as well as one of the shortest kicks. And in this kind of ranged heavy comp, which, by the way, ranged, that's a bonus. Having a short melee kick on range is incredibly powerful. Wind Shear is just kind of busted. So overall, I do think Elemental is very strong. Enhancement is probably one of the best melee as well. They bring really, really powerful AoE damage with both their Elemental build or their Storm build, although Elemental is a bit better in AoE. Wolves do so much damage. They do so much damage with all their fire stuff thrown around. They bring Lust. They're very tanky, very survivable, and they bring basically damage in every single pack. They're really good targets for Aug Evoker as well, which definitely is forming the meta. So I think I'll touch on this later once we get to one of the other S tier specs. It's coming up soon. But I think should that one fall down, this one definitely has a slot in the top tier of specs. You should expect to see this one a lot in your dungeons. Next up's Feral. We'll put Feral down in B tier. Feral got a big buff in compensation for nerfing the ring. However, again, I don't think they're too crazy overall. They're Druids. Druids bring a lot of really strong utility and the best raid buff in the game. 3% verse for Mythic Plus. Very, very powerful, especially on higher keys. Very survivable, very tanky. They nerf their off healing a bit, which does hurt. And overall, I just don't think their damage profile is too crazy. Their AoE burst, again, they're a dot-based spec. Was moved more into like bigger ferocious bites. I still think they're good, but I don't think they bring that insane stuff that S or A tier specs are bringing. And again, they are melee. You got to pay a bit of that melee tax when you come down into this season because of how strong ranged are and how like hard the dungeons punish melee. So as a melee-based spec, you definitely have to knock them down a bit lower. Moving on to Fire. Now, Fire just ate a bunch of massive nerfs. However, I don't know if it's enough to knock it out of S tier. Fire before was just the absolute most broken spec in the game. There was no way you could get away without bringing one in higher keys. Now, they are nerfed, and it was a large nerf. It was like roughly 14, 15% in that ballpark. But I think they had that damage to lose. Fire is one of those specs that when it's strong, it's really strong. They had changes to their kit as well, making Ice Block not actually an immunity, but a 70% defensive that also full heals you, basically, is incredibly powerful. They have a cheat death. They can mass barrier your entire party. They're infinitely mobile. They have a ton of damage in every scenario with their Sun King's Blessing, mini combustions, and it just kind of feeds more and more into having more combustion uptime. So all in all, the damage that Fire does is insane. On top of that, they also are fairly solid Augmentation Evoker buff targets. They burst really often, which does gain a lot of value with having many Ebb and Mites. They can burst really hard into Breath of Eons, which is Aug Evoker's big damage cooldown. So I think these are very, very strong. They also bring some stops. They bring stuff like Dragon's Breath. They bring a kick that's sort of in the middle between ranged and melee. It's 24 seconds, but you can get it down to less than that with their CDR button, the Ninth Day ability. Don't remember the name off the top of my head. They also have a talent that lets them reduce their kick CD when they interrupt stuff. So their kick's kind of in the middle, which is definitely useful in these ranged heavy comps. And overall, I think Fire's damage is just crazy. Frosty King, I'm put in A tier as well. Now, I mentioned melee overall are just bad, and that is true, but I think Frost's burst with Dragon is enough to kind of warrant it in the A tier placement. DKs have interesting utility in dungeons. They're not like overall crazy strong, but they are tanky, and they do also bring grips and stuff to help kind of set up pulls a little bit better. AMZ is strong as well. 5-man content should never end up actually bursting for the damage is done. And they're very tanky, but I think the damage they do with their obliteration builds, they have dragons very often that burst well into Augmentation Evoker as well. Frost is a very good Aug target. Ends up having them be just really good targets for this season's meta. Again, don't think they're like S tier needed and everything, but I wouldn't be surprised to see these guys in higher comps. I do think they're a little underrepresented as well, but overall I think Frost is pretty good and pretty fun even. Next up is the other Frost Mage. Put them in A tier. They also ate nerfs, but I don't think it's enough to really dethrone them from being a very strong spec. Frost's big thing now is really frequent burst. So before it was like their uptime on Icy Veins, that was changed. Icy Veins is now a hard 2-minute cooldown where they do more frost damage, you get a ton of haste. It's a pretty good cooldown. But their biggest thing is Comet Storm and Frozen Orb. And that combination works with this new talent called Cold to Snap, where basically every 45 seconds they can go into a pack, they can Comet Storm, getting the pack take more damage from you, Frozen Orb, then they can Cold to Snap, reset those, Comet Storm again, and then Frozen Orb again. Doing this every 45 seconds is a lot of really frequent burst. Coupled with that, they bring a constant slow, which is pretty good on everything that's not Sanguine Weeks. They're very tanky, double Ice Block or double 70% DR is very strong. And again, they bring Mass Barrier and a lot of other useful things for a dungeon comp. So I think they're very good. I think Fire is still a little bit better. But I could definitely see Frost moving up into that S tier. Should the nerfs to Fire be more than I thought they'd be. Overall, though, I do think, in general, Mage is in a very good spot. Next up, Fury Warrior can put an A tier as well. Fury is the 5-target king. in those smaller pulls, Fury will absolutely slam. Now, they don't really have a ton of ways doing damage outside of that number. It's very limited to like Dragon's Roar, and that's about it. But to those smaller pull sizes, Fury deals almost unparalleled damage. They do so much of those things. Very tanky, a lot of priority damage, lots of single target damage as well, and they also bring a shout. Fury is one of the best melee, just in general. However, I do think that the fact that they can't do those large uncapped pulls is holding them back a bit, but as a Fury Warrior, you're never going to be bad to be brought to a party. Fury Warrior is very strong and should remain at the top of the A tier. And next we have Havoc Demon Hunter. I'm going to put Havoc in B tier. They are pretty solid overall in terms of what they can do with their burst window every now and then. They have a 40-second burst window with I-Beam and stuff. And with the Spread Eagle build, which is the predominant build, they do have pretty solid 3-minute burst if the tank pulls around them. However, they're really squishy. I think that's their big deal. Spread Eagle has the benefit of gearing towards Verse, and they do bring magic debuff for the caster comp meta we're in right now. And I think the Vengeance is worse now as well, which definitely brings them up. However, again, I don't think they just bring anything that the above specs can do. Their damage is a little bit lower. Yes, if that 3-minute mark, you're doing insane burst damage, but outside of that, it's nothing too crazy. Your single target's solid as well. But I think you're just so squishy, you can't really be brought up into the A or S tier. You're kind of stuck down in B. Next is Marksmanship. I'm going to put Marksmanship in C as well. Marksmanship just seems to not be played, which is really weird. They do have strong burst, but again, you're a hunter, right? What do you bring in? You're not that tanky. You're just kind of doing your thing. And you are a little bit capped in what you can do. You have uncapped stuff with volley and explosive shot and stuff like that. But trick shots is capped at a certain number of targets, which definitely brings you down a bit. And just in general, you're not really doing the crazy stuff that the higher range specs you're doing. I think Hunter's probably fine, and Marksmanship is probably the best of them, for ranged at least. It could be bumped up to B tier, but it's just not really seeing that representation, so I'm going to keep it down in the C tier. Boomy can go up in A tier. Again, Druid is very powerful. They bring that really strong Druid buff, bringing Verse. Balanced Druid has really strong AoE damage with Starfall. They had a lot of changes recently to make their damage a little bit better as well, in terms of like Fury of the Loon and stuff like that. And they bring a really strong CD every 3 minutes and can have solid single target damage. Again, though, they're just not bringing that crazy damage that S tier specs are bringing. Their utility, strong. Off healing was nerfed, which is definitely a minus, but again, they are pretty good and can definitely have them up in A tier. Special notice, they do have Solar Beam, so they don't have a kick in general. I mean, you can path to get it, but it's really hard for most druids to do. But Solar Beam is really strong in that it can silence like lots of things. It's very rare to have an AoE silence, just Boomy, Vengeance Demon Hunter, and Hunters, I guess, and then also Assassination Rogue have it, which is worth mentioning. Boomy's is probably the best of those besides Digital Silence, so that is worth it. Not having a kick does suck though, especially in these ranged heavy comps. You have a 1-minute kick, you already have Shadow's 40-second kick, so it's there, it's strong, but it's not S tier. Next up, Outlaw Rogue will go down in D tier as well. They just don't have strong damage. They're like Fury Warriors, but they don't do anywhere near as much damage. Rogue utility is strong, but again, I don't know. Why are you playing Outlaw? Just play the other Rogue spec I haven't touched on yet. So, down in D tier they go. They need some love, and they are going to get it in 10.2. But again, Rogue needs a bit of help. Ret Paladin put in B tier. So Ret Paladin has very strong AoE damage. It definitely fell down a bit from the end of last season. Their single target is basically where they're really subpar, and the ring nerf definitely hurt them as well because they did use it. Versatility is strong in this spec. They're basically unkillable. Sanctified Plates is a hell of a button. Like that being a 2-point node is crazy. It gives them a ton of avoidance, armor, HP, that kind of thing. And in general, they're strong, but again, their AoE damage is really good, but they're on melee. Now, they do have really far range, which is strong, but their single target is just so poor that I really don't think you can bring them up into the A or S tier. Again, though, definitely solid, definitely really good. Could move them up into A. I could see it happening, but I'm going to keep them down in B tier on my list. Shadow Priest, S tier, easy. Unrivaled utility, really. Just Mind Soothe is crazy, Master Spell is crazy, PI is crazy, HP buff is crazy. They are squishy. Spore Cloak does help with that, but again, that's kind of their only downside. They have really good damage, really good often damage to like 8 targets, slightly more targets than that. just by spreading their dots around and stuff. Overall, they're just really, really good, and I would not be surprised to have them remain to be meta. They were meta in 10.1, they're meta now in 10.1.5. They work really well with AUG, they work really well with Fire, really well with lots of other bursty specs on 2 minutes, because PI is a hell of a drug. They're just really, really good, and I would not be surprised to see them staying up in S tier for even the rest of this patch, unless things are changed. Sub Rogue, we're going to put them up in A tier. Sub is probably one of the better melee. They were strong before, and then got a 4% buff coming into this patch to work out the nerf to the ring, which they didn't use in AoE, so that's just a net buff. Sub's really strong, probably one of the better melee, but again, it does fall down a bit because it's not one of those S tier comps. They don't do wonderfully with Evoker. Obviously, it's still a good target, but it's not better than some of the other options. So when you keep that in, when you factor that in, I will say that this is probably one of, the better melee. But again, not S tier. Damage is really good. They have really good prio. They can skip you with Shroud and stuff like that, and just rogue utility in general is insane. But I think the damage is what's keeping them out of S tier. We'll see if that Fire Mage slot falls down, and we could see something like maybe Sub or Enhancement or one of the other range specs moving up into that slot. But for now, we're going to keep them down in A tier and see how the meta progresses around them. Survival's going to be in C tier as well. Survival's actually very strong, which is really funny. They have really good AoE damage, pretty solid single target damage, but they are melee, and a melee that doesn't bring a lot of utility at that. So that's kind of Hunter's big downside. They don't really have utility for Mythic Plus. They have some options, but again, there's better things to be doing. Survival's damage was fine, but often the representation on these specs is also lower, so you don't get the best players playing them. So I think C tier is fair. I could, again, see this moving up to B, but for a melee spec with low utility and just okay damage, I think C tier is very fair. Unholy Death Knight, we're going to put it on a D tier. They just don't have the tools right now to be doing damage unless you're literally doing MDI pulls. They have quadratic, uncapped, scaling, whatever, but in regular Mythic Plus, they don't do very well. The same is true for right now. If you want to play a Death Knight, I would play Frost in AoE, especially because Army doesn't really do much in AoE. A lot of their stuff is just more single target focused right now than it is in AoE. And finally, Windwalker Monk is going to be in C tier. The thing with Windwalker Monk is that they have strong burst on a 2 minute, or 2.5, I think, whatever Zuen is. And I think it's weird. I might be 2.5 or 2. But, here's the but. They really don't do much damage to large pulls. They're kind of capped by what they can hit with Fist of Fury and Rising Sun kick with their tier set. So that's kind of where that's going to end up. They are really tanky, but I just don't think their damage is really there. Now, again, they can do well with all their burst tools when they line up, but again, they just don't have that uncapped. They don't scale too well with AUG, which is not great. And overall, I think it just leaves them a bit behind. So these are going to be my tier list video for Mythic Plus for Season 2, 10.1.5 of Dragonflight. Let me know what you think. Definitely a few of these that could be moving up or down depending on how the meta develops over the next few weeks. Again, I'll probably do one of these in 10.1.7 if we see some big class changes as well. The nerfs recently to the mages I don't think was enough to really upset them, but we could see some things shuffling around. We could see Enhancement or Boomy or even a Frost Death Knight or some of these other A tier specs moving up into this slot instead of Fire Mage. I definitely think AUG and Shadow Priest are fully locked in right now. I definitely could see some movement along the B and C tier as well. This is where we're putting it for right now. These are my thoughts, so let me know what you think. Also, make sure you hit the like and the subscribe button. Help me out, help me push towards those goals. We'll have a raid video out either Friday or Saturday, so keep an eye out for that. And with that, I hope you guys have a good week. Good luck pushing your keys. This is a solid tyrannical week, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace. A big thank you to all of my channel members who help support me and make videos like this possible. Thank you to 121, Payne, Joshua O'Connell, Brad Wisniak, Zulgan, James, Evandro Faraz, It's Bulk, Flattech67, and Angelo. A big shout out to all of you. You guys are such a big help to supporting the channel. If you want to support the channel and help me make bigger and better videos, then become a channel member with the link below. There's a little link in the description. You get to become a channel member. You get a ton of cool perks, including some emotes to use in live chats and comments. You get a shout out at the end of my videos. You get access to an exclusive part of the Discord, the Voodoo Discord server, and also access to things such as VOD and log review. So again, big thank you to all you people. Could not be doing this without you guys. Big shout out, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you for watching the video. Peace.